Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Or is it perception?
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity. The opportunity.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Hi. I'm back after a little while of not doing any podcasts. And sorry for that. Sorry for the delay in releasing episodes. I was pretty disappointed when I wasn't able to release frequent episodes being away in Peru, and I was really excited to get back to doing that, and hasn't really turned out the way that I was hoping, where I was going to be diving back in full force. I guess what I've gathered from many messages that I've received from people regarding the show and listening to the show is that you guys really appreciate it, or a lot of you, it seems, really appreciate it and really tune in when I sort of open up and get a little vulnerable and personal, and just, as Sharon Salzberg would say, get real. I guess that's also sort of like a 90s stick it to the man saying, or whatever, like something that you would say to squares, man. Get real, get bent. Bite me. Some Gen X phrases. But yeah, I just got really high, and it's been the first time in about 7 months since I toked on the marijuana smoke, as Cypress Hill would say. But I'm feeling really good right now, and I just jumped into the pool and put some snorkel. Was it a snorkel? No. What do you call? What are the goggles? I guess, but it was like one of those goggle masks without the snorkel piece, and was like swimming under the water and looking at the waterfall thing hit the pool water and the bubbles that it made, and looking at my amphibious monkey self and being like, wow, this is really awesome. And a lot of you people out there, and myself included, who smoke cannabis or have smoked cannabis frequently, would be like, yeah, man, duh. What's the big deal? Yeah, you get high and life's more fun. Obviously, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. I think that's why all of us partake, right? I think that's why we all got into psychedelics in the first place, and why we all, think smoking cannabis is enjoyable, because it makes things more fun. It's fun, and it's not like some, this isn't some grand revelation, but it came to me the other day. I was like, oh yeah, I'm depressed, and why haven't I thought of it? But I remember my father was asking me one time about, like we were talking about depression, because I suffer from lifelong chronic depression, and as most people do, actually, a lot of people do. And he mentioned something about, maybe you see someone, maybe try medication, you try it, see if it works. And I remember being like, at the time I was smoking I was smoking weed every day. I was really next episoding it. And Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, Chronic 2001 reference, by the way. If you didn't know. And I was smoking every day, and I was like, I don't need medication. I have medicine. This is my medicine. This actually, smoking in the morning or maybe in the evening, or, just balancing it out and, just balancing it out and being responsible with it, because I have, I think you can abuse it. I mean, Graham Hancock himself said that he was abusing marijuana. And, it can, just like anything, become abusive. It could become a crutch. And I've definitely been at points in my life where it was like that. But the past year, I was, I was definitely using it in a very responsible way, pretty much like once a day or maybe once every couple of days. And it really helped to sort of get me out of any feelings of deep, dark, overwhelming depression that I have been prone to feeling. And, that's really I can attest to the power of this medicine, to the power of this plant as being, why something that we need in this society to have healthy, happy people. I don't want to be medicated. I don't want to be put on a pill that numbs out the pain. And the difference is that when you get high on marijuana, it kind of puts things in perspective for you. It's an introspective tool. Aside from the fact that it's fun, it also puts a little bit of a microscope on your mind and on your life. And you can look at things in a different way and say, oh yeah, maybe I was kind of being a dick there. Or, oh, maybe I've been uptight and it hasn't really been. And, I think this is a tool that is here for us to use. Meditation, breathing exercises, those are good too. But there's still things that you have to sort of will yourself to do, especially when you're very depressed, like I tend to get. It's really, really hard to force yourself to do something. It's not that hard to just put some weed in a bowl and light it up and inhale. And then all of a sudden, you start to feel a little bit more empathy, a little bit more compassion for yourself, for your thoughts, or, the ones that you're attaching to, the ones that I was attaching to, the stories that we tell ourselves, and these sorts of things. Now, the truth is that I had been feeling very disconnected, which was one of the reasons why I decided to go back down to Peru. Many of you have listened to this show and listened to the episode where I talked about the dark night of the soul, I think it's entitled, where I had returned from my first ayahuasca journey and, sort of my life, not sort of, but my life fell apart. I was working with my friends. They had let me go, fired me. We ceased being friends, so I lost a large friend group. One of the friends that I was hanging out with the most at the time. I had decided to stop going on stage and doing stand-up comedy, and my girlfriend and I had split up, and so all of these things really impacted me, and I went into this dark hole. And it's when you go into this place, it's like you lose track of all possibility. You lose track of any sense of a future or hope of digging out of it, or ways or tools. You don't have the emotion. You don't have the emotional capacity to know that there is another side. At least that's how I felt. And it was like, no matter what anyone said, what anyone did, these things cause me, and I think there's biological, studies have shown, or science history proves biologically humans are developed to live in tribes. When you get excommunicated from a tribe, fired, relationship ended, lose some friends, these sorts of things, it's like being left out in the woods alone. It's a kind of a biological indicator that you're going to die because of loneliness, isolation. We're social creatures. We really do need each other. We need tribes. We need communities of tightly knit, well bonded individuals. And so, in tribal hunter-gatherer Aboriginal societies, if you were excommunicated from the tribe, it was, a good indicator that you were going to be out there alone on your own and more susceptible to death. So that's sort of like biologically imprinted in us. So when these things happen in modern times, we still have that feeling like, holy shit, we're going to die, and it does feel like it's the end of our world, the end of our life. All the things that we were familiar with and used to, all the friends that we had and the relationships that we had and the tight-knit bonds and the community and the sense of support all go away. And then there's uncertainty about the future, and that creates anxiety. And then so, you're depressed and you're lonely and you don't want to spend time with anyone. So then you start to, get into habits maybe where you're abusing substances or in my case, like smoking cigarettes and drinking more. And then that causes you to just be irritable and be an asshole. I definitely had a tendency to be an asshole and to be that way. And then that causes people not to want to hang out with you. And then you spiral more into a depression. And then it's just this cycle that keeps going on and on and on. Now, this sort of thing has been going on my whole life. I think when I was a kid, from by all accounts of what people say, it's, my parents and everyone, it's like when I was born, I just pretty much from the second I was born, I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. And that was it. I was like, I very much had my own mind. I knew what I wanted to do and I wasn't going to take it any other way. And that created a lot of tension in my household. My family, my parents didn't really get along so well. And so they had a lot of issues. They had a lot of trouble. And, I think a lot of the troubles and the issues that they had and still to this day have to a lesser extent is the fact that they've sort of bought into this lie of the American dream, this entire life lie that if they did all these things, if they got a house, if they got married, if they had kids, if they had a car, if they, that all of a sudden, things were going to be wonderful or things were going to be nice, maybe the way that they were when they grew up in a different time with their families and their parents in the 50s and 60s. And I think that was a different time. Those were World War II veterans coming back from the war and, buying in on this idea of the American dream and the man works and the woman stays home with the kids and, you have a family and the white picket fence and all that. And, and then everything is going to be fine and dandy, just pay your taxes and be a good citizen and everything's going to be fine. And I think that creates a lot of stress and a lot of tension for people. And I think we see that, develop where there's divorces or fathers walk out on families or whatever the case may be. But my parents were fighting and at each other's throats all the time. And I think it's because they really had to live up to this idea of who they thought that they should be, who the society thought they should be, who their families thought they should be, the obligations, the commitments that they had to each other and to the idea of creating this nuclear family and all these things. So they would fight with each other, and it was very, it was tough. It was a tough upbringing. I had both my parents. None of them were, they're not drug addicts. They're not alcoholics, but they, had their problems, and it was rough. It was really rough. It would be really dark, and I come along and I have this response where, I am trying to sort of heal myself by what Gabor Mate talks about. We develop these sorts of coping mechanisms when we're children. We're in pain, and then we decide to alleviate the pain by doing something. Like, for example, if you're diagnosed with ADHD, like I was, it's because you're in the present moment, and it's too painful to be in the present moment. Right? Like I'm in this household, my parents are screaming, yelling, arguing, fighting. There's tension, there's stress, there's anxiety. So I don't want to be in the present moment. So I do anything possible to distract myself from being in the present moment. And that is a coping mechanism to escape the pain, get out of the present moment, go somewhere else, do something else, put your attention on something else. And, that can that can turn into forms of addiction. And in his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, he talks about that. And there's other people that talk about this as well. Johann Hari, who wrote a book, Chasing the Scream, about the drug war, and a book that I just finished called Lost Connections, about depression, talks about this as well. So I basically got into a lot of things to try and get out of the present moment and escape. And, I wish those things had been constructive things, but they were just more destructive things, more things to alleviate my pain. Drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, things like that. And, in a healthy way, it's okay. But when they're used in an unhealthy, abusive way, and they become these habits that we cling to for attachment, attachment is something that makes us feel less alone and makes us feel like our pain goes away. That's where it becomes unhealthy. And Sebastian Junger talks about this in his book Tribe. Like, children need connection with adults, skin to skin contact. They need to be sleeping in the rooms with adults in the way that they did in tribal societies, where the whole sort of a couple families would sleep in a room together, and the parents would embrace the child as they slept, and these sorts of things, or at least sleep on top of them or near them or next to them. And in our world, we separate the child. We put him in his separate room, in this crib. And this is when children latch on. This is why children latch on to blankets or stuffed animals, is because they need something to give them this cozy, warm sensation of not being alone and being attached to something. We really need each other, really, really badly. The idea that we can get along in this world without deep, honest, true human connection is a lie. And I would argue that all of the institutions, all of the power institutions in our society function on isolating us. They operate in a way that increases the chances that we are separated, we're fractured, we're divided. When we're separated, fractured, and divided, then they can, come in and they can sell us things. They can try and fill those voids that can never really be filled with the thing that we yearn for the most, which is that real, true, honest, good, deep connection with other human beings. And I just I think that I have such a strong, I guess, dark side, if you will, or propensity to lean towards both extremes, that it's been something that I've been, I have to learn how to live with this and function with this and integrate this aspect of my personality in a healthy way, this depression. In Johann Hari's book, Lost Connections, he talks about, this false story. The false story is this claim that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in our brain, and that the primary solution is that we need chemical solutions like antidepressants. And he argues that that's not the case. He makes compelling arguments that that's not the case, that, in fact, there's nothing wrong with us. There's everything wrong with the environment in which we're in. It makes sense. Depression is actually a natural response to our environment. It's the sanest reaction we have, and it's like putting out your human antenna and being able to pick up on a frequency that's telling you something. It's this message that's being communicated to you that's saying something's not right here. Something isn't going right. And I think with a lot of things in this world, we want to cover up that feeling and say no. And I think that's what antidepressants do, is they cover up that feeling and they say, this is, let's get rid of this sensation. Let's get rid of this interpretation of your environment being not right, and let's help you adjust to the environment. And I think it was Krishnamurti who said, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a sick society. And that's really the whole goal here with people who are talking about being depressed and people that have anxiety and have these crippling issues, is that in our culture, we want to say, oh, that's a problem. There's something wrong with you. We need to get you readjusted to this culture, to this society. And, it's a tough one, right? Because for me, I want to function. I want to be a functioning human being. I want to be excited to do this podcast and to reach out to guests and have interesting connections with people and conversations and, really get fully behind the thing that I care most about, or at least the thing that I say that I care most about. But when that depression comes in and it gets me and it gets a hold of me, I don't have that feeling. I have a feeling like it's all fucked. Like it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. I don't want to do any of this stuff. I don't enjoy the podcast anymore. I don't enjoy reaching out to people. I don't enjoy conversations. And it's not a conscious decision. It's not, it's hard to describe to people who have not experienced depression, but it's an overwhelming sense of numbness. It's not that it's not like, oh, there's something to be sad about and I'm rationally responding to something to be sad about. It's that, I remember someone was talking about this study where they had these 3 plants, and one of the plants people watered and they took care of it and they said nice things to it. The other one, they hit it and they threw things at it and they were angry to it. And then the third one, they just neglected. And the one that wound up the worst was the one that was neglected. The one that had nothing, that nobody paid any attention to. And that's the sort of feeling, if I could describe a feeling of what my depression feels like, it feels like that. It feels like this just nothingness. No purpose, no future, no passion, no love, no joy. It's just blah. And in the world that I'm living in right now, it's really, really difficult for me. I don't have people directly around me that I could really connect to on an honest level. And what I mean by that isn't really necessarily setting aside some time to talk with somebody, but just to sort of be real. And, when someone's like, hey, how you doing? How are things? I think there's a tendency for us a lot of the time to just say, yeah, everything's good. And yeah, doing good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. And, we sort of put on this mask that we wear when we go out in public or when we interact with others, especially people that we're not really, really close to. And, the truth for me is right now, I don't have many people around me that I'm really, really close to. Directly, And, we really do need that. And so, I wanted to do this podcast today because I felt like I needed to get this out. I needed to talk about this. And I think that, I feel really grateful that I have an audience that wants to hear this. So I decided, why hide from them? Why hide from you guys? Why not talk about what I'm going through and what it's like and what's going on in my life? And I appreciate you all for listening to that. I think, for me, I just don't want to feel the way that I've been feeling anymore. It's really tough. And this is something I think that has been going on for me for a little while. And I think that what happens is that my ego really gets very big. And I think that I can handle it. I don't need to do all the work. I don't need to stay committed. I don't need to, fight to sort of, or maybe I don't necessarily want to fight. And I think a lot of the times that's what it feels like, it feels like it's a battle every day to just be in a positive state of mind, in a good mood. And a lot of that is, I feel that I take on so many things. I think on one of these podcasts, I talked about the way that I sort of look at the world is sort of through those glasses that the guy that Roddy Piper gets in the movie They Live, where he puts the glasses on and he sees through the illusion. He sees the marketing material and what's the message behind it: obey, consume. He sees the money. This is your God. These sorts of things. For whatever reason, my filter of consciousness is what I'll call it, because I don't know what to call it. My filter of consciousness is just like blasted open. And I tend to see the world in that way all the time, which really makes it hard for me to sort of accept this reality. And it happens with everything, right? From the moment I wake up in the morning, to the moment I go to sleep. Every single thing that I interact with, I'm looking at it through those They Live sunglasses and seeing seeing through the illusion and seeing the thing that's actually going on. And it really it makes it difficult to accept this life, and to accept like the joys and the pleasures, and see the silver linings and look on the bright side, and be more in a positive mind frame. I have a tendency to get overwhelmed with, my God, like everything is a lie. I'm saddled with student loan debt, and college is a scam, and I just I can't like I don't I have money, I have money issues, or I need to put out more episodes of this show, and then I need to market, and it's just like this overwhelming thing of all these aspects, all these ideas that start coming in about the books that I'm reading and the ideas that I'm getting about society and the way that things are structured, and depression and mental illness and emotional health and all this stuff. And it feels almost overwhelming to me, because I don't really know what to do with it all. I feel like this. I feel almost like a lost hope in humanity. Like I don't have faith that we're going to pull through, that we're going to make it as like a species. When all around I see divisiveness and yelling and arguing, and people online, and that I made a decision to take social media apps off my phone. And it was a big decision because I'm very addicted to my phone. Again, it's just another avenue. It's another thing to say, hey, come over here, look at this. Forget about your present situation. Forget about, the prison that you're living in, and be distracted by some guy getting, his nuts eaten by a cat on YouTube or something. It's like, so whatever, I'd be on Instagram. I'd find myself scrolling through all these stories, and I'm wasting like an hour and a half. What am I doing? Right? It's just like, this is just a distraction. This is something that's taking me out of doing something like reading a book, working on this show, communicating this message. I suppose that I feel so, that I feel is so important. This really crucial message to broadcast and to get out there. And I'm not really quite sure exactly, why that, for whatever reason, I'm doing the thing that I'm doing now. I never really in a million years would have thought that I would be doing this. It just wasn't in my, wasn't in my perception of who I am or who I would be, or, and, but for whatever reason, I do gravitate towards these things. I am in an unfortunate circumstance where I'm not necessarily an academic. I'm not necessarily a comedian, although I tend to take that perspective more often than not. I'm just like a guy that talks. And, I suppose that if I want to reach more of an audience, or if I want to sort of have more credibility underneath the sort of ideas that I talk about and things that I learn about and then want to share, that I should probably do something like write a book, or do something to kind of take it to another level. But it makes it really, really hard to do that when this depression really comes in and gets a hold of me. And it's been something that's affected my life, and it's affected jobs, it's affected friendships, it's affected relationships. And it's not only the depression that comes in, but it's also the anger that I have that I've been dealing with my whole life as well. So you get this anger, you get this depression, you get this resentment, you get loneliness, you get disconnection. I'm detached, and that's just a spell for chaos and madness and destruction. And it really feels like that. I feel like a nihilistic, person when I'm in that state. I just feel like I don't care, And to be honest, I have suicidal thoughts, you know. I don't I wouldn't ever take my own life. But I have the sort of philosophical. I sort of entertain philosophically the idea of ending one's life. If there is this sort of suffering, if we are living in this sort of prison, and I can't really find a way to make it work out and to make things seem like it's okay, to feel okay, and to get to produce the sort of life that I want to produce, then, I guess rationally it does make sense to exit from this world. Alan Watts has talked about this. He's brought up Camus. Camus having said that, the only real philosophical question in life is to go on living or not, and Alan Watts says we have to decide, is the game worth, what does he say? Is it worth the candle? I think he says, is the game worth the candle? Is it worth the juice? Is it worth it? And I always come to the conclusion that it is, right? Because you have to you put things into perspective, and I think that smoking cannabis helps us do that, helps me do that. Getting out of my head, quieting that rigid, tyrant in my mind, that ego in my mind, quieting that guy, coming into a position of having some perspective, feeling some gratitude, and then feeling some confidence to keep going on. And I have to say, the death of one of the people that has inspired me the most, Anthony Bourdain, was it really shook me. It really shook me, because here we have somebody who, in my opinion, has the best job in the world. He's a cool dude with good musical taste, good taste in movies and literature. Seems like the kind of guy that you want to just hang out with, have a beer with, smoke a joint with. Travels the world, eats at the best restaurants in the world, goes to amazing exotic cultures and locations, is one of the most epic storytellers of our time, has like a daughter, a girlfriend, a great life, and he decides to hang himself. Now, when that first happened, I didn't want to believe it, and I was saying, like, maybe he was murdered. He put out some tweets that were sort of weird. A couple weeks before, he tweeted, I'm not a fan of Hillary Clinton. I've been on the opposite end of her operative's wrath, and it ain't fun. And, people were saying that Asia Argento, she was one of these people that was very vocal and very critical of Harvey Weinstein and, all this sort of stuff. And so people were drawing a lot of connections to that. And I was thinking, well, maybe he did get murdered, right? And what does that tell you? Well, that tells you that people who speak truth to power get killed for it. And this isn't wacky conspiracy stuff. This is what happens in our world. If you watch the documentary Wormwood on... If you watch the documentary Wormwood on Netflix, you'll see a story about a man who the CIA said, or the government said, rather, that he committed suicide by jumping out of a window in New York at a hotel. His son wasn't buying that story, right? Went on this whole investigation to find out what his father, a scientist contracted by the government and working for the CIA, why did he commit suicide, right? Why? He didn't buy it. What really happened? Well, the end of the story, spoiler alert, at the end of the story, they wind up revealing that the CIA killed his father by hiring some thugs to come and push him out of a window because he was a dissident. He knew things that the CIA was doing, and they didn't know if he was going to blow the whistle. He had expressed concern. He said he wanted to quit. And, you got to watch the documentary. It's fascinating. It's really amazing. Errol Morris did it, and it's a docudrama, and Peter Sarsgaard plays the scientist. It's really amazing. Go watch Wormwood on Netflix. It's all about the CIA conducting experiments with LSD, but the real story behind that, and you'll be in for a real treat watching that. But this is not this isn't like some fantasy. This isn't stuff of the James Bond world and movies and crime novels and things like that. This is actually a fact of what happens in our lives in this reality. If you speak truth to power, if you upset people in high positions that have interest in profit and you threaten that profit, or interest in status and you threaten that status, you will probably pay the price. And there's other examples in history that we can draw from. But usually it's always the people that are speaking up and speaking out and speaking truth to power that people want to take down. So there's that possibility, right? Where I said, well, maybe that is the case, right? But then maybe he did kill himself. And if he did kill himself and he did suffer from this depression, why? And what does that tell you about our society? What does that tell you about our hierarchy of values that our culture and our society sells us as being things that we should strive for? A couple days earlier, Kate Spade had committed suicide by hanging herself. Billionaire, right? Empire commits suicide. Anthony Bourdain, the dream job. Millionaire, multimillionaire commits suicide. So if that is the case, if these people did commit suicide, what does that say about our cultural institution that we have here in the West and what we should be striving for? These things that are supposed to be making us happy aren't making us happy. And these billionaires and millionaires are taking their own lives because they're in pain, they're suffering, they're not happy. So it turns out, getting a good job and making money and working really hard and striving for these things, that doesn't always produce happy people. And sometimes people kill themselves because of it. So either way, it's fucked, right? You look at it either way and it's fucked. If these people are being murdered because they're being taken out because they're dissidents and speaking truth to power and, upsetting people and causing enemies of people that you don't want to have as enemies, well, that's fucked. And if they're committing suicide, that's even more fucked because they're going through, some depression, some issues, and there's nobody there for them. They feel like there's no way out, and they've achieved everything that you could achieve in this world that we suppose, that our society tells people that the things that they should strive for and they should value, and those people who are doing it, who are making it, who are getting there, who are rising to the top, are taking their own lives because they're still empty. They're still a void. So either way you look at it, and then, for me, looking at that and reading these books about depression and tribal societies and modern society and all these things, it was making me really, really, really just feel like there's no hope here. There's just no hope. And I find myself in a position where I'm not necessarily, doing too well financially, and I have some things that I need to take care of that are sort of weighing on me. And, I'm thinking about what am I going to do? What are the next steps? What are my next moves? These sorts of things. What direction do I want to go in, etc. And, I'm looking at the sort of messages that I want to be communicating, what I feel is the most important thing right now. And I have this show where I talk about psychedelics and I talk about, liberty-centric issues and, where I guess one of my main things that so what I'm getting at here is that I have been trying to think about, well, what should I communicate? What should I talk about? What should I say? No, I don't feel like I'm ready. I feel like a fraud. I feel like I'm not informed enough. I'm not, an academic. I'm not credentialed. What kind of things am I putting out there? What kind of things am I saying? How do I feel about psychedelics? What's my opinion about this and that? And I was just thinking, I can't, I don't know what to say. I don't know where to go. And then I remembered, well, I get a lot of messages from people saying, hey, I really liked that episode that you did, that solo episode on mental health, or I really liked that, that you got really vulnerable and you went to this place and you opened up and you talked about these things. And I said, fuck it, why not? Why don't I just turn the microphone on and start talking about this? Start talking about my experience and what's happening. And I suppose if I'm credible enough to talk about anything, it's that. So I will, and I am. And yeah, so I'm trying to really figure out what to do for myself. What would the best plan of action be for someone like myself who gets into this depressive state and whose ego happens to be such a cocky son of a bitch that what happens is when I get into that state, or before I get into that state, I say, don't worry, I have a handle on this. I know what to do. If I just, smoke a little weed every now and then, or if I just try and commit to a meditation schedule. But oftentimes I fall off the path. And I, once again, I'm coming back to this sort of notion of, well, what is it exactly that I'm supposed to do? Because reading this book by Johann Hari, Lost Connections, where he's talking about this, the ability to sense pain and the solutions for depression are, being connected. Like he goes through, he has 9 causes of depression. He says that it's disconnection from meaningful work. 2 is disconnection from other people. 3 is disconnection from meaningful values. 4 is disconnection from childhood trauma. 5 is disconnection from status and respect. 6 is disconnection from the natural world. 7 is disconnection from a hopeful or a secure future. 8 is the real role that our genes play. And 9 is the real role of brain changes. And so, when I'm looking at that list, when I'm reading this and I'm thinking about these things, I'm going through that and I'm saying, okay, well, meaningful work. Well, as of right now, I'm not necessarily working full time on anything. And I have this show. And this show doesn't necessarily pay the bills. So there's this sort of depression that comes on from that, right? It's like, oh shit, there's this meaningful work that I want to be involved in, but it's not growing at the rate that I would want it to grow at, and oh, now I'm depressed. And then it's like, well, what else can I do, and etc. And then there's disconnection from other people. I'm sort of at this moment right now, I'm not around like a tight-knit group of friends. I'm not with a lot of people that I can just be real with and honest with and live, in a true moment with. Disconnection from meaningful values. When I get into that depressive funk, I feel like the values that I have just go right out the window. And the only way that the best way that I can think of to help myself is like immediate masking of the pain, which comes in the form of, for me, like food and cigarettes and alcohol sometimes. Disconnection from childhood trauma. Well, I feel that I've sort of connected with that, and I've worked through some of those things, but now it's about integrating that experience and integrating that sort of process, that time period I went through when I was working with ayahuasca, that I was really trying to connect with the root causes of a lot of my ailments and traumas. And it's still tough. It's still really tough, because you go away, you go to a retreat center, you have this profound experience, you feel like your life has been changed, And you want to, at the time you have these ideas. And for me, I was very hopeful. I was very like, when I get back, I'm going to tell, I'm going to tell the people in my life who mean a lot to me that I really love them. I'm going to have these honest conversations with these people. I'm going to, I was just filled with all these ideas. And then when I get home, I realized that it's actually the environment that we're living in and the sort of values that the people that I'm trying to associate with, friends, family, the things that they've bought into, it makes it really, really difficult to open up to somebody and have an honest moment and have a good conversation or really connect. I'm finding that very difficult. The sort of idea of being immersed in a community that is my family sounds like a good idea. So I'll attend a family function only to feel really alone and really disconnected because nobody really wants to go to the places I want to go to. Nobody really wants to or has the time or has the attention span to really get into the zone that I want to get into, the community sharing environment that I want to be a part of. I was recently at a Father's Day thing, and it's like all the kids are running around, that no one's really able to really stay in the present moment and have a meaningful conversation with you because they're all worried about the kids and they're having conversations about the kids and this thing and that. And everyone's distracted. My dad's on the grill. My mom's like, I told you to turn the chicken, make sure it's not, make sure it's cooked through. I know what I'm doing. I've grilled for 30 years. They're like the Costanzas. So just there's this like level of stress and anxiety in the atmosphere. And I feel there's no opening here for me to jump in. There's no room in here for me to be around people that are, sort of grounded and open and ready and willing to have fun and enjoy life. It just seemed like a very hectic environment. So there was that disconnection there. And, I don't have a good relationship with my mother. And so I'm not really speaking with her. And that, that's definitely difficult because in one way, it's like I love her, I care about her. I would love to have a normal relationship with her. However, she is somebody who is suffering herself, so it makes it really, really difficult. And I made a promise to myself, or not really a promise, but it came to a point in my life where I was like, there was an argument that I had with her, and I finally realized, like, this is it. Like she's the way that she is, and it's really sad. It's really unfortunate because she's suffering and she has no willing to open up to the possibility. She's not willing to open up to the possibility that it might be something that's going on in her life that she needs to readjust or, something like that. There's no ability there for her to really, look at it as something that is her problem. She puts it all on the outside world. So that makes it really, really difficult. It was really difficult for me. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to stop worrying about trying to help her or, butting heads with her, arguing with her. And I'm just going to, sort of disconnect. And obviously there was trauma there from growing up. So it's like, there's still some unresolved stuff that it's pretty difficult to work through. The next thing is disconnection from status and respect. Well, I think that I found myself to be in a pretty good place of status and respect when I was doing stand-up and I was doing my other podcast, Part of the Problem, and I was on this network and I was selling advertising for them. And, I also had that job where I was working with my friends. And even though it wasn't the thing that I wanted to do, I had status, I had respect, I had connection. And, when depression creeps in, it's this signal that like something's wrong here. You're in pain. There's something that's not quite right. And so, making the shift away from those things cuts those connections off. And then that causes depression to creep in and take over. But it was a necessary step for me in order to go on my own journey to evolve and to sort of do the things that I feel more connected with. However, the journey itself is pretty rocky and bumpy. And what happens is when you're someone like me who's really prone to getting dragged under by that depression, it feels like, it feels like it's multiplied, and like there's no way out, right? So it's like it's always this sort of catch-22 sort of thing. It's like, well, in order to not have depression, it's like you need to have, meaningful, you need to have status and respect. Well, in order to have status and respect, you need to not have depression. So it's like, okay, I'm in this sort of weird state of like, how do I get back to baseline? How do I get situated where I'm not self-sabotaging and when I'm not diving in when I'm not getting sucked under. Disconnection from the natural world. So, this depression's coming on. I'm living in New York City. There's no natural world there. And it's just like I'm in this machine, I'm in this matrix. And a lot of people can handle this. A lot of people can handle this because they medicate. I think it's 1 in 5 Americans are on some sort of, I think 1 in 5 Americans are on antidepressants for either depression or anxiety, and 1 in 3 Americans are medicated with some form of prescription pill. And on top of that, think about all the people that need to go out and drink, and all the people that need to smoke, and all the people that need to, do whatever they need to do in order to cope with the existence, whether it's take Adderall or, whatever to focus at work, or just whatever people need to do to escape this reality, escape the circumstances, or to cope with the circumstances we're in. And, I sort of was like, no, I want to feel this circumstance that I'm in. And when people are coping with social media, Instagram, followers, alcohol, these sorts of things, then they can live in a city like New York and they can, really forget about paying attention to the underlying root causes of why they might feel unhappy or why they might feel the need to constantly, compulsively check their social media feed for updates and notifications and likes and these sorts of things. All of this, advertising to buy these things, do this stuff, the political discourse, everybody's at each other's throats. It's all just like a sucking distraction away from what's really going on here. And so I think by someone like me who's not letting himself get distracted by those things, who's looking out at New York City and saying, my God, this is a fucking machine here. I got to get out of this place. There's that disconnection from the natural world. Being in the natural world, being in nature, the months that I spent in Peru was wonderful. I mean, it was beyond wonderful. It is a medicine in itself. Being in nature, getting exercise, being around people that you care about, having community bond, having that community bonding with people, getting into deep conversations with people about really serious things and fascinating things and mind expanding things and having fun and being silly. And, that's where all the real juices of life really are. And I was looking at that situation and being like, damn, like it's so hard to replicate that where I am right now. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be in the Amazon rainforest, disconnected, and just with the people you're with, and eating the food that you're eating and everything. It's when we talk about working with psychedelics and we talk about all these things that could be very beneficial to you, I don't think it's very beneficial to talk about psychedelics in this vacuum of like, well, it can help people with depression and then we'll just send them on their merry way into this society that's functioning so toxically. I think it's important to say, toxically, is that a word? Yeah, I suppose. I think it's really, really important to say that the environment plays a massive part in that. And that one of the most important things when working with psychedelics and when, working with ayahuasca specifically, in my case, is the community atmosphere and the environment that you're in. That's, if I went to this retreat center and there was no ayahuasca drinking, but there was everything else that was there, it would still produce, if not the same, a very close, similar effect. Living in the natural world, exposed to sunlight, no light pollution from electricity, not being connected to the constant buzzing notifications of the fear-based, media paradigm that everyone seems to be existing in nowadays. Not really worrying about stressing about bills and finances and this and that, and just being totally connected with the people that you're around, spending time to take in the little moments of butterflies flying around and meditation classes and yoga, reading books, and just at ease. The way that for 300,000 years we have been, this version of anatomically modern human beings. And it's only up until about 10,000 years ago. The majority of our history we spent in tribal societies and communities and tight-knit groups with tight social bonds, living off the land in nomadic hunter-gatherer sort of tribal societies. And we look at that and we think it's primitive and we think it's archaic. But these people, they didn't have depression, they didn't have anxiety, they didn't have suicide, they didn't have a sense of hopelessness and despair and all these sorts of ailments that we have in our modern world. We wonder, where does this all come from? ADHD and drug addiction and abuse and all this stuff. Where does it come from? Well, it comes from our modern world being this cage that we live in, right? And the reason that we get depression, the reason that we feel these feelings is because it's a response to our environment. It's a response to what is happening. There's something wrong. Something bad is happening. We have that feeling if we're attacked, right? We get the fight or flight kicks in. Well, this is like, having this sort of chronic epidemic of depression and what we call mental illness is like we're being attacked all the time, but we never know where the attack is coming from or what to do about it. And it's just this constant barrage. When you encounter pain, the brain responds. So it's like, and what happens is we can get pushed in this response state. But, some of us will stay there. So but really what happens is if something goes wrong and then the brain responds and it's pushed into this corner, and it only is able to get out when there's a flexible escape hatch that's provided for it. And if the world keeps causing that on you, then you'll just sort of stay in that place. And in Johann Hari's book, Lost Connections, he mentions that, and he talks about how your genes can make you more vulnerable to depression and anxiety, but they don't write your destiny. And I think that in my case, I am somebody who genetically am predisposed to being way more vulnerable, way more susceptible to the lures of dark, depression. But I can also interpret that as being a gift, and I think it was McKenna who said that, that the price of sanity in this society is a certain level of isolation and loneliness. And, you can, that is the case. I mean, it's almost like it's the Matrix right in front of you. It's saying, take the red pill or take the blue pill. If I was presented with that option, right, it would be like, okay, let me take the blue pill and let me go back to this world, and I hate to put it in this way of saying I'm awake and there's people that aren't awake, but it's like, I look at my life and I look at the person that I was when I was like, say, 22, I had sort of like a sneaking suspicion that maybe there was something more. And I think that's why it led me to the path that I'm on. But I was a vastly different person then, whose reality and perception was way smaller. And, the very idea that I'm speaking about and the ideas that I'm speaking about, it never would have entered my mind back then. I would have been one of these people that if I could imagine somebody who was like me back then listening to this podcast now and being like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Yeah, get a job, man. Like, shut up, stop complaining. Like, you get yourself together. You're just being sad. You're being a pussy. You're being a loser. Whatever, something like that. And it's like, no, you don't have the capacity to like have an open mind enough to really dive into all of sort of the emotional and an intellectual depth of the entire sphere of existence and what's happening. And I'm not saying that I'm somebody that's like, some grand wizard that's able to do that. Grand wizard. That I'm some like, great person that's able to do that. But I think the use of mind expanding drugs, of consciousness expanding drugs have helped me get out of my head more and see things from a different way, and open me up to reading about things from other people's perspectives and taking on that information and then, using it to weigh it against what I know about reality and come to my own conclusions about what I feel or what I interpret to be true. And I think that's one of the most interesting things that you can do, because in a way I'm sort of like, I'm sort of like a scientist. Taken out of context, that sounds horrible. Mike Brancatelli, I'm sort of like a scientist. No, but I'm sort of like experimenting with myself, and I'm saying, okay, let me get as much information as I can and bring it back to see if it relates to my experience. Is this true? Is this false? Does that add up? Does that make sense? And if it does, if it checks out, if it seems like it's if it agrees with me, then I proceed with the necessary next steps. And I think so. There's also this quote that I love by, I think it was Joseph Campbell, that says, "The madman and the mystic swim in the same waters. The only difference is the mystic comes back and the madman drowns." And, I got to be honest, sometimes I feel like the mystic, but oftentimes I feel like the madman, and I feel like I'm drowning. And I think it's just this overwhelming sense of like, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? What the hell is going to happen? I can't seem to make any, for example, one of the things I think about is earning an income, making a living, right? And it's just the whole notion of, and I think maybe you might have heard me like rag on Aubrey Marcus sometimes, like on the show, and I think it's because a lot of the times, like, these sort of self-help, go out there, you can do it, get things done, these sorts of like own the day and that kind of stuff, these sorts of people, I think it's all well and good, and I think a lot of the things that they preach is really great. That's really great. Wake up in the morning and meditate and do breathing exercises, and then take a cold shower, and then exercise, and then run, and read a book a day or whatever it is, and all these things that a lot, not just Aubrey, but people like that, these entrepreneurs that have made it, and they're telling you a way that you can make it, if you just, take these supplements, or if you develop this morning routine. Tim Ferriss, wake up in the morning, journal, have turmeric tea at night, or, swim, laps instead of run, or whatever the advice is, drink butter, coffee, this thing, that's all well and good for the people that have the freedom and the time to sort of live these sorts of, entrepreneurial life on their own terms people. There's a lot of people that are really well off out there that can do these sorts of things, or that they have an idea and they're passionate about that idea, about a business, something they want to sell, some product that they can offer that they can then make money in return to build some sort of career. And then you have the people out there now, well, a lot of people are just trying to get followers, just get as many followers as possible, Instagram followers, and then people send them things to promote, and then they make money that way, and it's this advertising, and we're living in this sort of like predatory environment. Every single aspect of the society that we live in this day and age, whether it be offering student loans to 17, 18-year-old kids who have no idea what they're getting into because they've been indoctrinated since birth to accept a certain version of reality that's been programmed in them by the state and the state's cronies, to accept things as the way they are, to just be obedient serfs, and accept like a debt, basically be saddled with debt. These kids, they can't make. I couldn't make the right decision at the time about college. I just figured, I've been told my whole life to go down this path, and if I didn't, then you'd be a bum, you'd be a nobody. So I figured, why not? We live in this society where people have credit cards, and everyone's taking out these student loans and these sorts of things. So I'm just giving one particular example, but when you're sort of living in this environment that's like telling you all these things, there's a underlining level of predation. There's a fundamental level of preying upon other people in order to, for the benefit of someone else, right? And so our whole society functions on how can we get more business? How can we earn more profit? How can we get something off of somebody? How can we get someone to be, in Facebook's example, Facebook wants to know, how can we get people to stay on Facebook all the fucking time? That's where they make their money, because then advertisers will see how much time people are spending on Facebook. This is what they do. And they want to advertise there because the eyeballs are there. Wherever there's a mass group of people, that the way that our society is set up is that we look at that group of people and say, what can we do to get something out of these people to benefit us? Instead of what we should be doing is say, how can we serve the needs of these people so that they can feel good and they can feel happy and that we can all live in a peaceful, productive way where we're actually collaborating and competing with each other on a friendly level, where we're not taking advantage of other people, where we're not all, saying, well, that's the way it is. So you work for an advertising company where your client is, Exxon Mobil, and you're like, hey, this is what I feel like is, but it doesn't sit right with you, but you're like, hey, I need to pay the bills. I don't know. I'm not really sure if this is or you work for a weapons contractor, you work for Raytheon, or, hey, it's a job, it pays the bills, right? And that's the sort of attitude that everybody has to take on, because that's the game rules. If you opt out of that game, if you get off that path, well, there's nothing left for you. Right. And not everybody can be a CEO, an entrepreneur. Not everybody has the time. So people have to go to these jobs. People have to do things that they don't agree with, that they don't believe in, that they don't want to do. And then that causes suffering and hurt. And in my particular situation, I decided to step out of that and say, I don't care what happens to me. I'm not going to compromise my integrity. I'm not going to get involved in situations that are humiliating and degrading to me. I'm not going to give my most valuable resource up, my time, to something that I don't fully believe in. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. The only thing that matters to me is spreading a message of, spreading a message to people of what I see in this world, and hopefully hoping that somebody resonates with it and is able to look at the world a little bit differently, so that maybe they have the courage to go ahead and do something that they're capable of that I'm not. Someone out there that's smarter than me, somebody out there that has different sets of skills and from a different background, and just that's the reason why we exist, right? I mean, if I look at this world as a game, I look at it like probably one of the biggest challenges and the most exciting challenge for me is saying, not how can I dominate, control, and win the game, but how can I join and unite with other like-minded people to inspire people to reach for things that they didn't think that they were capable of, or just get a message out there that maybe helps people look at things in a different perspective, and then causes more people to work together, to join together, to really stand up for what is right, and take a stand for what they believe in, and then change the entire mode of the game, change this game to a whole other game, one where the rules are written in a completely different way. That seems like way more of a challenge than just playing this game according to the game rules and seeing if you can get to the top. That's way easier, right? If you compromise yourself, if you start to do things that you don't fully believe in, if you start to do things that you don't really want to do, and one of my favorite people of all time, Alan Watts, says, we get into these situations where we go to this job that we don't want to do so we can make this money, so we can live, in a house that we have to pay for our whole lives. So we have a car that brings us to the job that we don't really want to be at. So we wind up spending all this time doing things that we don't want to do in order to help get us out of situations that we can actually do things that we want to do. And he's like, but we spend all this time doing the things that we don't want to do. We're spending all this time doing these things for hoping to get to this moment where we say, this is the real moment of life here, only for that moment to go away. And then we go back to doing these things that we don't want to do, right? It's like, what kind of life is that? Spending your life doing, do you really live your life as you, if you spend the entire time living it for somebody else, doing things that you don't want to do for somebody else? If you're living a life where you're not really being honest, and you're not really being true, and you're not opening up, and you're not talking to people and communicating your version of the truth and your version of reality to them, and collaborating with them to build on that and to build new ideas, and if we're constantly putting masks on and sheltering ourselves away, well, are we really living? And I would say no, we're not. I think that's where a lot of the ailments of our world come from, is like we're not joined together in a communal way where we can work towards a common goal to bring about the only thing that really matters in this life, which is increasing the amount of joy, decreasing the amount of suffering, increasing the amount of time that we have to spend with the people that we really truly care about and that we really love, and to get as much joy and happiness out of that as possible. I mean, if those are the good feelings that we can feel as human beings, then why are we not trying to always get into situations that produce those feelings? I mean, I think every person really wants that to happen. However, the structure that we live in, like I said, is predicated off of being predatory. So they set the tone. They set the tone for the whole thing. They're like, this is the way things are going to go. If you behave and if you go along with it, then you can, maybe you can get out of this. But if you detach yourself and if you don't, well, then you're gonna face rocky waters. So what I'm saying is, it's a lot easier to face rocky waters when we're joined together, when we're united with a common cause, with a common purpose and a common mission. And to me, that mission is liberty. Liberty and freedom from oppression of a higher people in higher positions of power selling us and enforcing their will on us, a particular version of reality, and saying that if we don't conform to their version of reality and play by their rules, well, then we're going to suffer consequences for that. And, if you really start to suffer consequences from that, you can wind up in a cage like an animal. We will, their entire, this entire system that we've either, that we sort of like passively accepted or tacitly accepted is one predicated on force. Do what we say or else. Do what we say or else. And that creates, I would make an argument, and I'm trying to make the argument that creates most of the stress and tension that we experience in our lives. Even if we don't know it, it's there. We have to do these things that we don't want to do. We do these things that we don't want to do, and then we feel isolated. We feel alone. We feel like we have anxiety. We feel like we have depression. Then we need to take some kind of medication, or we need to self-medicate in some way. And so we drink more, and that causes problems. Or we take medication, and that gives us headaches, and then we have to, or we get suicidal thoughts, or whatever it is. These medications, they have side effects, and nobody really cares because the big pharma industry is making over $100 billion off of this stuff. So I can't help but look at the world and see these larger systems at play that are keeping everybody, that are making it really, really difficult for everybody to get their head above water. And, so I'm thinking about like, well, what can I do? And so I don't necessarily want to be a part of the problem by adding, some product or, working for some company to help get, people more, social media likes and things like this, because I believe that's a part of the problem. Unless I could find something that was really, really aligned with my values and my beliefs. And this is, by the way, read this book, Lost Connections. It's really, he has quotes in there from the World Health Organization, the United Nations, saying that, the dominant biomedical narrative for depression is based on biased and selective research outcomes that cause more harm than good. They undermine mental health and cause more harm than good. We need to move on from focusing on chemical imbalances and work on fixing social imbalances. Now, that sounds a little scary coming from the United Nations, because they're like, oh well, we need to improve social connections with people, so we need to we got to talk about like one world government type stuff or whatever. They can interpret that in any way, right? And usually what happens is when people want to sell you things that have, that they sound good, they sound like they're packaged with good intentions. There's really a deeper purpose to that, which is always control and status. People, because that's what we all want in this world, right? Like Johan Hari was saying in this book that we want status and respect. And a lot of the ways that people know how to get status and respect is by climbing the hierarchy of this game, climbing to the top of the pyramid, and dominating the status game that they've set. And they'll do anything, by hook or by crook. They'll do anything to get there, and they'll do anything to stay there, because it's really, really, it's more difficult to go down in status once you've achieved a certain level. To go down is unimaginable to these people, and so that's one of the ways. That's one of the things that these are all the things I'm thinking about. And then he talks about the disconnection from a hopeful or secure future. So when I'm thinking about all these things, and when I'm trying to come up with a way out, I'm not seeing a hopeful future. I'm not seeing hope. When I go on social media and I see what people are liking and what people are posting, people want to see 9-year-old Asian girls who can't even drive Lamborghinis, come out of one and talk about how she's the most ballin' ass flexer and throwing dollar bills everywhere, and the music and the culture and the reality TV and the nature of our politics and the nature of political discourse and civil discourse. It's all degrading. When I look out there, it's just a wasteland. It's an absolute wasteland. It's absolute madness. People have become insane. And it's not surprising, because we are so cut off from our natural environment. We are so disconnected from what really nourishes our spirits and our souls and really gives us real meaning and purpose to live in this world. And it's a battle, it's a fight, it's a struggle for many people out there, myself included, which is why I'm talking about this. So that's what's going on with me. Yeah. And, having this moment of realization and having this sort of aha, like I feel like I've gained a certain level of perspective of this situation. Now comes the part of like, well, I need to do something about this, and I appreciate when, people send messages. If you send messages and you're, expressing your concern, I really do appreciate it. And it's, I think that this is something that I have to try and walk the walk of the mystic and not the madman. I have to try and swim to shore, and I have to do whatever I have to do in order to get there. And for me, I'm looking at this as, well, if there's something that I'm going to do in this life, it's going to be sharing and spreading ideas and talking about things that I feel are important, like what I've been talking about now. And in order to do that, it's going to take me a lot of work to get there. And in order to do that work, it takes a certain degree of isolation, as McKenna said. It takes, to have this sort of sanity, takes a certain level of isolation. It takes a certain level of being cut off, because you're spending a lot of time, reading and researching and taking notes and, trying to understand, these ideas. And for me, the things that I'm going to look forward to and the things that I'm going to start to do more of is to try and get into areas where I feel like I can be more a part of a community and connect with people out there. Because currently I'm very disconnected from anybody who would be around me in this area to speak with and to talk with on a more regular basis. And so that, I think, is going to be the first step in sort of rehabilitating and trying to stay on the steady path. Because I can't stress enough, and I hadn't released a podcast episode for about 2.5 weeks. And I love to do this. I love to have interesting conversations with people, and I haven't reached out to anybody because I've just been in a hole. And it's one of these things where really nobody can help me except for myself. You know, people out there that, they say like, oh, if you want someone to talk to, you can talk to me. That's okay. But I do a really good job of rationalizing. I do a really good job of separating myself from the emotion and talking about it in more of an abstract way of depression. Well, depression, I'll cite books and I'll talk about these things, but really I need to connect deeply with my feelings and my emotions, and that's been really difficult for me to do. And instead of doing that, I become irritable, I become angry, I become depressed, I become nihilistic, and obviously I am depressed and that just fuels it. And so recently someone sent me a message and they, were asking to come on the show, and I sort of like snapped at them. And, although I do disagree with some of the implications of what they said in their message, I really responded in an impolite and rude way. So, today when I smoked and I went in the pool and I just had some time to like be introspective and really go into myself and get into the feelings and the emotions, it really came to mind, and I said, wow, I was really an asshole. I really was an asshole there. And I don't want to be an asshole. I don't want to be in this position where I get sucked into a depression and then I do things that causes me to, burn down bridges with people and burn down bridges with relationships and then, disconnect from friends and things like that and pull away from community, because that only causes me to go deeper into a state of loneliness and despair. And then I have no one to connect with and no one to reach out with. And this has been going on. So, I know that this is what I have to do now, is to take the appropriate steps in order to make sure that I get myself in a position where I can, function in a very, that I can function. I mean, really is really what it is. I need to be able to function. And talking about these things and reading up on, for example, I read recently, I really want to write a book, and I really want to put these thoughts and ideas together into one cohesive piece. And one of the things that I'm most passionate about, I've brought it up on the show now a couple of times, is education in schools and schooling and compulsory education in the student loan scam and this whole thing. And when I get into this stuff, it just reaffirms, my initial feelings and beliefs, and it gets me really worked up. It gets me really emotional. And when I get that way, I get angry because I feel like I've been had, and in a sense we all have been had. We've been really sold on a false bill of goods for many things in our lives. And I don't want to dwell on that. I don't want to get lost in that. I want to figure out some solutions, some real solutions. And one of the only real solutions that I can really think about is, that really does work, is to just sort of, and this might be a part of my process, a part of the healing process, is going through this tougher period that challenges you, because it's not easy to go against the grain. It's not easy to go against everything that's being pushed in your face by this mainstream media, pop culture, society that, like I said, is based on this predatory model of force. It's very difficult to go against that. It's very difficult for me. So, and I think it's very difficult for a lot of people. So I think that, I think one of the best ways of combating that is simply just saying no, is simply just taking a stand. And I think suffering the consequences that come along with taking that stand by, choosing to get yourself involved in something that works, something else that that goes with the grain of how you're feeling. And so that's going to be my solution, is to try and get with the grain of how I'm, the sort of like-minded people out there, the companies, the organizations, the things that people are doing out there that maybe not perfectly align with my values and my beliefs, but are in a similar place of alignment, and then I can go from there. And so once again, I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening, and I'm sorry for not getting an episode, these episodes out sooner. I'm going to start to reach out to some more guests, and I'm going to start to put some good things together for this show, and I'm going to be putting into practice getting back into a healthy state of mind, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be blissful and I'm going to be happy. But I know that I need to serve a purpose, and that purpose is to be informed enough to talk about the things that I want to talk about on this podcast and to have the conversations I want to have on this podcast, so I can deliver you guys good content. And as long as I keep that mission there, then I have a reason to keep going and to keep doing it. So with that being said, the next solo episode that I want to do, I want to talk about some of the things that I talked about in this podcast. I want to get into a further discussion about, or I want to further elaborate on maybe my story of education and schooling, and refer to some things that I've read and some information that I've gathered about schools and how they got started and what their real purposes are, and things like that, and then the student loan scam and this whole thing. So maybe I'll dedicate certain episodes to these things that I really want to talk about. I was thinking about doing sort of like podcast episodes where I read a couple books and then I try and talk about and elaborate on more about those books and kind of put my own spin on it, put my own story into it. Anyway, I hope this podcast was okay to listen to. I know it was sort of one of those like talking out loud, sort of discussing my own issues podcasts, but it was helpful for me to get it out there. And I don't think we're gonna have any real solutions right away, but I think coming up with a plan to work for a better chance of arriving at more sustainable, lasting solutions to combat deep feelings of disconnection and depression and anxiety and loneliness are going to be a topic that I'm going to be talking about quite a bit, and a project that I'm going to be working on to get myself straightened out and functioning. So thank you everyone for listening, and if you like the show, please go leave a nice review. 5-star review would be great on iTunes. I would really appreciate it. It would really make me feel a lot better. Please have sympathy for me. Really baiting you there. But yeah, no, if you like the show, please let me know and go and tell people about it and stuff. And let me know, maybe ideas for people that you would like to see me have conversations with, and we'll try and get those people on. I also have a Patreon page if anyone wants to go there and contribute. Man, it sounds really weird trying to like do this pitch now after a lot of the things I said, but it's like, hey man, I need to do a little bit of promotion, I guess. I can't just, I wish I could exist as this, wizard out in the middle of the forest. That would be nice, but no, I can't. So if you want to go to my Patreon page, it's patreon.com/Mike Brank. And yeah, if you donate as little as $1 a month, it makes a huge difference. Really, I think the Anthony Bourdain suicide thing really affected me. It kind of compounded onto the feelings that I was having already. And it just left me in a really dark place, but I'm feeling a little bit better now. Thank God. Thank you for putting the beautiful cannabis plant on this planet. And yeah, thanks to everybody out there. I love all you guys. All right. Till next time. Peace.